I think of all the characters in the Palm Sunday story today is the donkey. The donkey is the one who carried Jesus into the city of Jerusalem on that fateful day. In this story, Jesus is about to enter the city with his disciples, where he's going to be crucified, and they come to a little village outside the gates of Jerusalem, and Jesus tells his disciples to go into the village where they'll find a donkey and bring the donkey to him. So they do as he says, and he gets on the donkey and he rides it up into the gates of Jerusalem and into the city. Now, in Jesus' day, having a donkey was sort of like having a pickup truck. A donkey was a beast that could carry jugs of water or bags of grain or big loads of firewood or even a person. And whatever you need, the donkey will do it. And so the donkey, in a way, is like Jesus, because a donkey is obedient and humble, and Jesus was obedient and humble. So it's appropriate that Jesus came into Jerusalem riding on a donkey. Now, in our reading from the epistle to the Philippians today, Paul says that Jesus was humble and obedient. He says he was in the form of God, but he emptied himself, becoming human, and he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. This passage in Philippians is probably a familiar hymn at the time that Paul was quoting, and is sometimes called the kenosis hymn. Kenosis is the Greek word for emptying, so it's a hymn about emptying yourself. Paul says, Jesus didn't regard equality with God as a thing to be exploited, but he emptied himself and became human. In other words, Jesus was God, but he emptied himself of his divinity so that he could become human. He left his dwelling place in heaven and he descended to earth so he could be one of us. You know, if your glass is full of water, you can't fill it up with milk. First, you have to pour out the water, and then you can pour the milk into it. And so, if you're God, you can't become human unless you pour out your divinity and fill it up with humanity. So that's what Paul is saying that Jesus did, or that what God did in Jesus. He emptied himself. Jesus became humble and obedient, even to the point of death. And the donkey in the story obediently takes Jesus into the gates of Jerusalem, just as Jesus obediently goes to his death on a cross. So this is an important spiritual point. Spiritual progress takes the form of self-emptying. In order to get God into us, we have to empty ourselves of some of our ego. The Franciscan teacher and monk, Richard Rohr, says that all spirituality is about letting go. You've heard that phrase, let go and let God? There's a lot of truth in that. Meister Eckhart, who was a saint in the Middle Ages, said, God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by a process of subtraction. You know, consumer culture trains us to fill ourselves up with stuff, with busyness, with money, with anxiety. And at the end of the day, what we really need to do is sit down and just let some of that go. That's what contemplative prayer is all about. In contemplative prayer, we sit down and make our minds quiet. We allow ourselves to let the thoughts just go away, just disappear. And if thoughts do come up, then we just let them go again. We empty ourselves of our thoughts. If a thought comes again, we use our sacred word like Jesus or peace and let the mind return into quietness. And when we do that, We're emptying ourselves of our agendas and our anxieties, our fears and our anger, our hurts from the past. We let them go and we let God. That's what self-emptying is about. Paul says, let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who emptied himself and humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Richard Rohr says that the Christian life is a life of downward mobility. We try to be humble just as Christ was humble. We let go of power and prestige and position. The trouble with power and prestige is that they almost always make people arrogant and heartless. When we get to the top of the pile, we think somehow we're smarter than everybody else, we're more able than everybody else, so we should make all the decisions. You know what they say, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when I see some of the most powerful people in our country, I see an arrogance and a self-righteousness that comes from them, from being on top. Even Christian pastors can fall into this trap. I built a mega church with thousands and thousands of people, so obviously I'm smarter and better than everyone else, so the rules don't apply to me. And then abuse follows. Same with the heads of corporations and industry and science. And that's what we're seeing in the Epstein files. People who are powerful and they are full of themselves. The way of Jesus is the way of humility, self-emptying. That's why Jesus had to come from heaven and be a humble carpenter, to live among ordinary people, and to be with the people. He rejected power and prestige. He embraced humility and empathy. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as a thing to be exploited, but he emptied himself and became human. Once upon a time, there was a king who lived in a castle and had many advisors to help him make his decisions. And this king loved his people and he loved his kingdom. And when he went out to go through the kingdom, all the people bowed down to him. And his advisors told him that everything was fine, everything was good in the kingdom, but he began to have some doubts. He wondered if everything was really that good. So he told his advisors that he was going on a journey with his trusty squire. So he and his squire started their journey, and when they went out of the gates of the kingdom, they stopped and they exchanged their clothing, their royal clothing, for ragged clothing, the clothing of a poor person. And they came back in secretly into the kingdom and walked among the ordinary people in the city. And they listened to what people were saying. People were saying, the king doesn't care about us. The water pipes are broken, and where's the king to fix them? I can't feed my children, much less pay the taxes to the king. Doesn't the king care about us? And he heard rumors about his advisors. He said, the advisors to the king are taking bribes. So when he and his squire got back to the castle, he summoned his advisors and he fired them all. And he got new advisors and he began to fix the things that he had heard that were broken. The things that he had heard about when he was in disguise. He had to empty himself of his noble position before he could hear the truth. He had to humble himself before he could live with integrity. And so it is with each of us.